Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Burlington. It is with the greatest of pleasure that we have you in our audience on this, our 76th edition of Burlington and Beyond. And hopefully we'll hit 100 or 200 in the near future. But tonight's a special night. We have a very special guest. We're going to have two guests. The first guest is Brian Curtin, our esteemed gentleman, town collector, tax collector, and treasurer for the town of Burlington. And we've been chit-chatting here, and he has a long history of Burlington, and I'm very, very pleased that you'll have a chance to meet and hear Brian. If you don't know him, you should go up and meet him and say hello. He's a great individual. Been in Burlington. Well, I'm going to let him tell you himself. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Pat. Appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation.
Tell us a little bit about your past. How long have you been in Burlington? How many members in your family? What do you like special, or do you find anything special about Burlington?
I find a lot of things special about Burlington, but I'll start with, I've been here since 1955. My parents moved here from the city of Somerville, which is, not far away.
Yep.
So I was 5 years old when we moved here. I went to Burlington Public Schools, 5 years in the Memorial School, as my first 5 years of grade school. Then I went to the Union School, which is now the police station in town. And then the Union School, which is the recreation department. The Center School, which is the recreation department, was the 7th grade. And then I spent the next 5 years, 8 through 12, at the Marshall Simons, which is now the middle school. So my whole 12 years of public education in Burlington. Graduated in 1968 from Burlington High School, and then went on to Northeastern University here in Massachusetts. And I spent my first year, my freshman year, at the Burlington suburban campus. So, a lot of Burlington in my education, obviously, and then graduated and went on to the MITRE Corporation, and that was my co-op job, and I spent almost 8 years at MITRE. And then I was first elected tax collector in the town of Burlington in April of 1976, and there was a charter study, and they combined the job of treasurer and tax collector in 1977, and I ran again, and I won 2 years in a row, elected office, and I've been the elected official treasurer collector since 1977. So 41 years and 40 years, and I'll be celebrating my 42nd in April of 2018. So very proud to be here and blessed to have had this position all those years and had the service to the town of Burlington, and that the residents have.
I'm sure that the people of Burlington are appreciative of what, especially someone who has been here so long. You add a lot to the town. What is, very simply and directly, what is the most difficult part of your job?
I think the most difficult part of the job is, balancing all the responsibilities. But I think for me, obviously, my major responsibility is investing the town's funds. And, we're a $100 million corporation, so we have a lot of money. We've got, a stabilization fund that's over $7.5 million. We have, we just got certified a free cash of $12,732,000. We have an OPEB trust fund of $6,381,000. So, I have a lot of money that I have to invest. That's the responsibility of the treasurer by statute, by state law. So that responsibility weighs on you every day. The financial markets obviously are very, cumbersome and difficult to navigate. I don't obviously do it all by myself. I'm a registered investment advisor in the state of Massachusetts. I obviously have taken several courses and obviously have a lot of experience in it. But what I do in the investment of the town funds is controlled by the Massachusetts general laws. Chapter 44, Section 55 defines what vehicles that we can invest in. So it's basically things that are on the mass legal list of banks and what they can invest in, and that's what the town can invest in. And you know, a lot of those things are government agencies and corporate
Yeah.
bonds and things like that. So, you know, we're restricted in what we can invest in. But you know, that's the major part of a lot of my responsibility that makes it difficult.
That's enough, really?
It is. I think the other part that, you know, and those are the things I'm very passionate about. The other part that I'm very passionate about are the town employees' benefits. You know, we handle the benefits for all the town employees, both the school department and the fire, police, and all other town employees. So, you know, we handle the health insurance, the life insurance, disability insurance, dental, the retirement system. So that's my part of my job is to report to the federal and state government of all the town's withholdings of all the employees. We handle the payroll for the town employees. So, but the health insurance, you know, we have almost a $13 million budget for town employees for their health insurance benefits, which I manage as well as with my office and, you know, other town officials. But I've been very passionate about that, and we have a real good success story, which we've talked about with the Ways and Means Committee, Larry's committee, and you know, we've been in front of the town meeting one as well. But those are some of the major things that I handle for the town, which is...
You mean there are more?
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, there's just the collection of the revenue, the
Yeah.
$140 million revenues that we collect. The town's tax levy is $106 million. You know, we just voted last night, the selectmen voted, you know, the new tax rate for fiscal year 18, and it's going to be under $11. It's $10, and I think it was going to be $10.83 or whatever the dollar amount was going to be. But you know, we collect all that office and all that money, those funds in my office. We send out the tax bills. My office is responsible for sending all those tax bills out 4 times a year, collecting all those monies. I have a great staff that does a fabulous job in doing that. You know, we're all computerized, obviously, but you know, that's a large responsibility. We collect over $9 million in excise tax for the town of Burlington, and we're responsible for sending those bills out and collecting those funds. We handle the collection of all the water and sewer revenues in the town, which, you know, are $3.5 million. State aid, which is $9 million. All those funds add up to the $140 million that we collect. The meals tax is $1.7 million. The room occupancy tax is $2,600,000. So we collect, you know, all those funds in my office, and that's a large responsibility. Accounting for it, recording it, and making sure that, you know, it all balances at the end of the month. So I think those are, in a nutshell, the responsibilities. We do other things, but you know, those are the major things that we do in the treasurer
I'm happy
collector's
that
office.
you're there. I'm happy that you're doing the job. I could not even begin to imagine trying to handle all those numbers. I know you're trained, but that
Yeah.
still is quite a bit of responsibility. I know you're at your job every day early, and I know you stay until late, relatively late, as often as is necessary. And I remember when I visited with you, you were filling out forms for, you were applying for something, if I remember correctly, or?
Public disclosure of, you know, anytime that the town issues any debt or, you know, bond issue, or we're financing a project in town, we have to do what's called a public disclosure statement, which is done through the bond rating agency, so that we can, you know, any public person that wants to purchase the town of Burlington's bonds, there has to be a sheet that explains the finances of the town, and so it's a public disclosure statement. So we have to update that information pretty much quarterly. So we're in the process of doing that because we're going to be looking to go out to bond some of our major projects in the springtime.
Yeah.
And so we were updating all that information recently. So,
Okay.
and that's when you came in that day when we were discussing that.
You had it spread out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of information, obviously, when we're talking about some of the numbers that I was just throwing down at you. I mean, that information all has to be put in a concise report, similar to what we do when we, you know, do a proposed budget that Larry's familiar with at the town, you know, we put out to town meeting and so forth. A lot of that same financial data is in that financial disclosure statement because, you know, the public needs to know the
Sure.
financial stableness of the town, you know. Even though we're a AAA credit rating and we're very well position financially. The public doesn't all know that, and that disclosure statement
Right.
gives them a snapshot of how financially stable the town is.
So Pat, if I could get in here, if
Sure,
you don't
go
mind,
ahead.
since we're about halfway through. I appreciate it. So if we could just differentiate your job between that and the town accountants. It sounds like you're the one who would collect all the money
Right.
where the accountant would spend it.
Well, it's not so much
Allocate
that
it.
he would spend it, but Paul's responsibility, Paul Segarino's
Segarino, right.
responsibility is actually the books and records of the town. So each department gets voted a budget from town meeting. Ways and Means makes a recommendation, as you know, Larry, to town meeting, and then town meeting votes on the floor of what that appropriation will be, and you have to live within that budget. Paul's job is to keep those records that, okay, you've got a $20 million budget that's broken down between, various, ways to spending it. He's responsible to make sure that you stay within those limits and boundaries. So, and he keeps the records, the town's records, entire records relative to that.
He would keep
and
the
according
record
to the law.
of the expenditures. Maybe I should have put
Right,
it that way.
exactly,
And you keep the records of the income, of
Yep.
what you're taking in.
correct.
And so could you project for the next fiscal year, or this fiscal year, how much more are we taking in this year than the prior year?
Yeah.
Would you know those figures?
Oh, sure. I mean, roughly like, in any given year, as you know, the guidelines that were set by, the Ways and Means Committee with town management was that, we weren't going to increase the budgets by more than 3.75%. Accommodated accounts were supposed to stay no more than 5%. And then the tax levy, we didn't want to increase that more than 4% for fiscal 18, and we've
If you
stayed
don't-
within those limits.
If you don't mind, just if you
Sure.
could explain accommodated accounts to people.
Sure. The accommodated accounts is actually, and I have my sheet here, is made up of the major expenditures of the town, Larry, and I'll just go through some of them. One of them obviously is the health insurance, which is the major portion. And I just mentioned it was $12,888,000 for fiscal 18 that it was budgeted. And then some of the other major expenditures is waste removal, which was $1,728,000. The debt that we pay off on the bond issues that we've issued to finance previous projects in the town, that, building a new fire station, police station, whatever it might be, school systems, the 2 new schools we built, Memorial School and the renovation to the Marshall Simons. That debt that we pay off over a 20 or 30 year period, that debt, the principal was $4,481,000 last year, and the debt interest was $1,813,000.
So
the other
liabilities that the
those are
various
liabilities the town
understand.
has. The pension system, the Middlesex County Retirement, $8,841,000, and special ed tuition and transportation was $9,576,000. Those accommodated accounts added up to $45,341,000. We needed to keep the budget within 5% of that. We didn't want to go over, because that's a major part of our budget. If we look, the schools are about 40 million. The town local government's about 34 million. You add those 3 up, we're at that $100 million, $110 million mark. That's where most of the money gets spent, believe it or not.
So
And
you-
it's, salaries obviously is a big part of
Sure.
those budgets.
I think like 87% or something like that.
It's around 80%.
So what's the increase in the revenues to the town last year versus what you could project for this year?
I don't have the exact figure, but
Approximate.
we obviously, the taxes being the major part of that, okay, is that, we didn't want to grow the levy more than 4%. So it's roughly 4%. It was 3.9 something percent is what the levy increased. That's what we voted, which was what we voted at town meeting and set the tax rate for. We just set it last night. I think it was 3.94%, the levy increase.
The
Then
increase, okay.
obviously, the other major revenue sources are state aid. I think state aid went up a small amount, like 5%. And then motor vehicle excise tax, that went up a small amount, like, probably the same, 5 or 6%. So, overall, those all went up. So maybe the average increase was 5 or 6%, as far as revenues go. and that's what generates, some of the free cash, Larry. So the difference, if the levy's only at 4% and we're getting revenues at 6 or whatever, the difference is money that's going into free cash. And free cash, as I just mentioned to you, it was going to increase to 12.7, I think, this year is what we got certified as a free cash number. So that's a very healthy number for us. One of the biggest numbers we've had in years, quite honestly.
Wow. So is it about 5% per year that we're growing as a town revenue-wise?
Yeah, I'd say pretty close to that. The tax levy's not growing at that, but revenue-wise, yes, I'd say
right.
that's probably
Based
close.
on the growth of the town.
Growth of the town.
Increased expenses.
We had over $10 million in new growth just in value.
Wow.
Because of all the construction that's going on. I mean, you know all the projects, you can see them around town that are going on, and it's amazing what's happened here in Burlington. It's not the same town that you and I grew up in, Pat. Or
No, I know it. That
we've
was
been here.
that is exactly one of my thoughts or one of my questions. But before that, I happened to be at dinner on Sunday with some friends in Burlington, and I'm not sure of exactly where my friend got the figure, but he said, there's 121 processed food establishments in Burlington. And I thought about it, I said, 121? I'm not sure where he got it, but as I began to think about 3rd Ave and, the rest of the Turnpike and even here up and down 3A, how much more growth is there in Burlington?
How much more growth?
Yeah,
that's hard to say. That's a good question. I don't think I can predict how much more there is, but I just listen to John Clancy every year telling me, how many more fees that he's taken in from the construction that's going on. It's just amazing what's happened over the last 10 years. I mean, it really is. And, I've been here, like I said, since 1955. It's not the town I grew up in. I'm not happy with the traffic, obviously, but there are so many other benefits that we've had, and the reason we have such a stable tax rate. I mean, we have one of the lowest tax rates in this area, in the state, actually. I think last night, Jim Doherty, our appraiser assessor, was saying, I think Woburn is the only, contiguous town that has a lower tax rate than Burlington. And we're blessed because of all the business that we have. And, as much as the traffic is difficult to navigate around the town on a daily basis, they provide, 62% of the tax levy.
Yeah.
Where the residents are only paying 30% of the levy. So
you can't take in that kind of those kind of benefits without some sort of sacrifice.
Exactly.
And the fact that I think it's been estimated there's over 100,000 people on the Turnpike during any work day.
The daily population.
So I mean, there's all the traffic. So.
So if we could only put a toll booth on 3A, we'd be all set.
A toll booth on 3A.
Yeah,
That's
there you
something
go.
to think
yeah,
about.
that would be additional revenue, Larry. I don't know if that'll work. But.
So let me ask you, what do you feel your greatest accomplishments are? So you have spent so long in helping to run the town of Burlington, govern it.
Personally,
If you don't
Larry,
mind me asking
probably
that.
no. I don't mind you asking that at all. I don't like to blow my own horn, but personally, the things that I've been passionate about and I've been involved with that I think have been success stories for the town, besides the financial success of the town, which is certainly not all attributed to me. I've been part of it, and I've been blessed and feel very honored to be part of the growth and financial success of the town. I've just been very fortunate to be here and part of that.
That
But
probably makes your job a little easier, too.
it does make my job a little easier. I've listened to many of my colleagues from several of the towns and the small towns that financially are, under the 2.5 limit and can't raise their taxes more than 2.5, and they have override questions constantly in these communities, and can't even fund a new school or can't even fund other projects, and there's user fees at the school system and the children, and rubbish removal and all those kinds of things that Burlington has never had to deal with. So that makes my job so much easier, more pleasant. There's no question. So that has made it easy. But the things that I feel success stories that I've been involved with is the purchase of the Burlington Ice Palace for the children of Burlington. We bought that rink back in 1988. Town meeting voted
1988.
Yeah,
Wow.
and that's been a big success story because we've been able to keep what the average price of an hour worth of ice time would be for the high school programs and the youth programs of the town would be almost double what we charge because we own the rink and we support the rink. And the town owns it outright now. We did it through a bond issue, over 20 years ago, and now the town owns it outright. The bonds are paid off. So it's a big success story. We have it professionally managed by Facilities Management Corporation. We have a 20-year lease with them, and it's not up till the year 2029. And they pay us over $36,000 in user fees on an annual basis that goes into a surplus reserve fund to help pay for, you know, the maintenance of certain parts of the thing. We just did a brand new parking lot, as you probably know, which was a
That's right.
$275,000 project. And the money came from, there was a donation made of $100,000 from FMC, the corporation that manages it. And then the town picked up the difference from that surplus money that we've been collecting since, you know, with the user fees, or the lease payments, basically, whatever you want to call them. But that's been a big success story for the town. We've done over $3 million worth of renovations to that building that have been paid for by FMC as part of the lease agreement. You know, the whole lobby was redone, the refrigeration equipment of, you know, where the ice gets generated and so forth was done. The insulation of the walls, part of the new roof was done. The lobby was all done over. So those are kinds of things to make that building an attractive building and good place for the kids to go and skate and so forth. And it's been a great thing. Maybe you have a hometown, the high school, which we've had many successful, as you know, hockey programs in town. But, you know, our high school has won the championship more than once here under the coach, Bob Concession. So we have, those are things that are really nice to talk about in Burlington.
Do you feel Burlington's current credit rating would be a notable accomplishment?
Oh yeah, because when, you know, I was first involved, I think when I was first elected, I think we only had like an A credit rating or an A+, and then we went to AA, and now we're AAA, which is the highest credit rating you can get, and that's gone.
Great.
I mean, the town's budget in 1980 was only $20 million, and it's grown to now over $140 million. And the tax levy back when I first got elected was like $16.5 million, and now the tax levy is $106 million. So you can see the growth of the town. That isn't attributed to me, obviously. It's just how things have happened in Burlington because the town has, you know, grown so fast. But
Location.
I mean,
one thing.
it's just amazing. But we're just so blessed. The other thing that I'm passionate about, Larry, is the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation that I've been a part of since the inception. And they've been giving scholarships out, obviously, since the 50s and 60s. They had a program that started at the high school, but the legislature back in 1988 voted to authorize us to do what was called a checkoff system, and we could send the tax bills out and ask residents to donate if they wanted to. And we created the Burlington Foundation.
Where the money comes from for the Scholarship Foundation?
That's part of the money. It's somewhat complicated, but the foundation, the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation, started back then. We're now a private charity that we're now Dollars for Scholars, and we've separated from that and formed a separate tax ID number and so forth. But I've been treasurer of that since 1980, well, the town obviously since 70, but the Scholarship Foundation since 88. And you know, that has grown, and we have a trust fund of $1,100,000, endowment fund of over $720 million. So that has been, you know, a huge benefit for the town too. So and we give out $361,000 annually to scholarships.
Wow.
Over 400, you know, kids
Wasn't
get
aware of that.
scholarships every year, which is amazing. The high school and so forth, and you see these kids, and they're going to the top colleges in the country. You know, to Harvard, MIT, you know, all over the place, the West Coast. It's just amazing.
I'd like to mention, if I may, another thing that I'm sure you're very proud of, another aspect of your life that I realized the first time I walked into the school building over at St. Margaret's, and that is that over the years you have been a teacher of the advanced kids for religion, and I know that you're involved in recognizing those kids at one of the masses during the year. And from the pictures that I saw, it goes back quite a way. You've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, that's my other passion, Pat, is that, you know, I grew up here and I was an altar boy. I've been going to St. Margaret's Parish since I was a little boy, 5 years old.
Wow.
and received my first communion there, as well as my confirmation at St. Margaret's. But I was an altar boy since the early 60s, and almost till I was 18 years old. I actually thought I wanted to be a priest back then, and then, you know, it was choosing whether to be a priest or to be in public service. I was a big, you know, John Kennedy supporter back then, obviously, and I've been a lifelong Democrat. But the Kennedys and their, you know, because of being involved in government, I think that was my passion, and that's why I've chosen this career. But religiously, I'm very religious, and I have been involved at St. Margaret's CCD program for over 30 years. And I've handled the 11th and 12th. I've been the coordinator since 1988 of the 11th and 12th grade program. And like you say, we have a class every year that graduates after they've gone through the program for 12 years. I only handle the 11th and 12th grade, but it's been a passion of mine, and I just love being with the kids and hopefully, you know, giving them some of the, you know, important things in life that will help them as they move on to college life. You know.
It's an honor, and I'm sure that Father Silver and all of the others certainly appreciate what you've done for the kids. I've seen it. I've been at St. Margaret's for quite a while, not as long as you have, but it is very important stuff.
Brian, thank you for coming by tonight, and want to thank you for sharing your accomplishments and what the town has been like and what we're continuing to be today.
I said to Brian that we expect him back in 1 year to continue.
I would love
this
to come
a
back.
half hour is much
No,
too.
it isn't enough time. I know we were talking about some of the other things we wanted to hit on, and you didn't even get to them yet. So there's so much to talk about. But I appreciate the invitation, and you know, I wish you both the best of luck. Continue to do all the nice things you do in town, Pat and Larry. Your volunteer work as well. We appreciate everything that the volunteers do for Burlington, because
And
that's what makes us the community we are. Let's
And
face it.
I'll see you tomorrow night at Ways and Means.
You will. I'll see you tomorrow night. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
You're, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
You speak first. Introduce yourself. I apologize.
Good evening
I did.
again.
I did. I goofed. I am sorry. It
Especially,
won't happen again. I promise.
this is Pat sitting next to me. He just apologized for not introducing myself. That's okay.
Are we on now?
Things happen. Yes, we are.
We are. Okay.
After all, you heard the music, right?
Yes.
That was it. That was the cue.
Okay.
And our special guest the second half hour is Michael Wick.
Hi.
And currently the new director of Burlington Public Library.
Relatively so, yeah.
Well, welcome to the Burlington Library, the directorship.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for coming on our show to talk about the hopes for the library,
Well, thanks for having me.
direction for the library, and what made you want to go into the library? What if we start there?
Sure, good question. So it's funny, I was talking with my little brother. I did Big Brothers for a few years when I moved to Boston.
Oh, really?
And,
Wow.
we were talking about, because he's in college right now, and he's in his third year, and we were talking about how for a lot of young students now in college, what they go into college for isn't necessarily what becomes their profession in later years. And I think that's proving more true now,
Sure.
more so than it did in the
Yep.
past. And so my educational background when I was an undergraduate really didn't have any directional impact on me becoming a librarian and a library director later on. But I went to school for literature. So for a lot of people, that makes sense. If you want to be a librarian, you first need to learn about literature, but being a librarian is much more about customer service, finding information, not really sitting down and reading a book on public time.
Yeah, you'd have to be a little disappointed if that was the, what you're looking to do. And being director, you certainly don't get too much time.
No, none at all.
To
And I'm,
put the feet up and start reading.
oh, exactly. What would that look like to the to the public? And
Research.
Yeah, yeah. But no, it's so it ended up coming later in my life. I ended up moving to Boston to live with my then girlfriend, now wife, who was going to school at Tufts University, and she's now an art educator in public school system
Where's that?
in Revere.
Revere.
Yeah, and so she teaches kindergarten through fifth for art. And so I, at the time, really wasn't doing anything that in Indiana, where I grew up, in Fort Wayne, that I couldn't do out here. And so I moved out here to this
Fort Wayne,
area.
Indiana?
Fort Wayne, Indiana. Are you familiar with it?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So I started working in hotels and worked my way up from the front desk at the hotel into managing their accounting department. And it was quite a slog. Hotels are very difficult work. They expect very long hours. And it can be pretty, unrewarding work in monetary aspect.
But you could have a good book with you.
Yeah, at least on my lunch break. So I started looking around for my secondary education, what that next step was going to be. And I started thinking about becoming a high school teacher, literature teacher, since I was my undergraduate. And I realized that I was actually a pretty good kid when I was in high school, but I still gave my teachers a very hard time. And I knew that that was going to come back on me if I went to, become a high school teacher. And so I started looking into libraries. And for library schools, we've got a wonderful library school in Boston, Simmons College, one of the first library schools, or School of Information and Library Science now is what it's
I
called.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
And that is where you graduated from.
And
That's
that's
where you
where I-
got your
yeah.
MLS
And that's
from.
Yes, exactly.
That was your entrance into Burlington, pretty much.
Well,
Into
it
library.
took some time, to
Yeah.
to make my way here. First, I was working in Wellesley as a reference librarian. Then I moved to the Peabody Institute Library in Peabody, which you can always tell the difference because there's two Peabody Institute libraries. And there's the Peabody Institute Library in Danvers, and then there's the Peabody Institute Library in Peabody. And you can tell very quickly where a person is from if they call it Peabody or Peabody. And so I was there for about 5 years. Working as their head of reference, and then I saw the job advertisement for the assistant director position in Burlington, and came out here after Lori Hodgson, the former library director, hired me on, and then she retired, and I very grateful that I found myself in a position where the trustees offered me the position of director in the library, and so here I've been since September of this year.
That's great. That's
Tell us,
great.
how do you like the library, and what would your plans be for the future or near future?
So I think this is a fantastic library, especially in terms of a lot of its libraries in the area. It's a library with a really great set of opportunities, especially as we were hearing from Brian, all the growth that's happening in the town of Burlington, that potential exists as well for the library. And so I think that our greatest benefit right now, we've got two benefits. First, our staff is second to none. We have some of the best staff in the library network that we're in, the Merrimack Valley Library Consortia, as well as in the state of Massachusetts and beyond. And secondly, we have a wonderful amount of support from the residents and from the town in terms of the budget.
And from the Friends of the Library.
Absolutely. We've got
Tell
a wonderful
us about
Friends
I am a
organization.
member of the Friends
Yeah,
of the Library.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Friends of the Library. What's their function? How did they come together?
Sure.
And if one don't want to become a member, what would they do?
Well, that's a great question. So become a member now because they're going to be raising their rates in 2018. So those rates are going to tick up just a little bit, but it's still a very reasonable membership fee that they have. I believe it's $7 for a
Yep.
senior citizen, $12 for families.
Per
Year.
Per year,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that money, as well as all of the funds that the Friends raise for the library,
How do they raise?
go into our programs. So how do they raise? That's a great question too. We've got the ongoing book sale that they have inside the library. We also have two book sales in the spring as well as in the fall where they raise quite a bit of money. They do an annual fundraiser at the Flatbread Pizza Company, where a portion of the proceeds go to the sales that night go to the Friends.
Yeah.
And they do a raffle at the same
And they
time.
do a raffle as you
Yeah.
go in the door. And if I remember correctly, I think the last time they hit close to $3,000.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
which
quite a great
is-
sum.
And that was pretty much the amount that they raised with the book sale.
Yes, each individual book sale.
So
and then
some here and some there, and
yeah.
it's terrific.
And the May baskets as well.
Yeah, the May
that's
baskets is
about
another big
$5,000
program.
a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So it's a great amount of support that the library gets from the Friends, and it ends up going on the main to fund our programs. So all the programs for adults as well as the youth and young adults is funded almost entirely by.
Who at one point I was part of the group that did the programming,
Yes.
the night programming.
Yeah.
And I got busy. I couldn't keep up with it, and I remember Lori had some difficulty. Who does that now? What happens with regard to choosing the programs, the evening programs?
Sure. So we've moved that into more of an in-house process, because having one person overseeing the programming of the library, especially as we're looking to expand that programming, it's now under the direction of the assistant director, who's going out looking for individuals. Also, we still do have some Friends involvement with that, as well as presenting to the Friends for the Third Thursday program, which is what we do for the adults. But we're actually going to be expanding our programming, and so it looks like we're going to have expanded support from the Friends for our adult programming, and so we're absolutely looking forward to offering more for the adults
That
of
is-
Burlington.
those are great
Can we learn a
ties.
little bit more about
Sure.
your planned expansion? So I was trying to find out what the
Sure.
direction would be going, and this might answer part of that question.
Yeah, so that
Great.
and it's definitely going to be, that aspect of it is going to be one of the main growths, because we have on the main about 3 programs a month that we do for adults, 3 or 4 programs a month that we do for adults. Most of those programs take place in the evening, where it's presented by someone, maybe an instructional or an educational program. It would be interesting to have more daytime, or something that wasn't always on a Thursday, some shifting dates, as well as a larger variety of programs that we have.
What would we expand into? What additional new programs?
Oh, types of programs?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the great thing, is that there's just all sorts of programs that we can expand into. Right now, what we're looking at is an authors program. So we're looking at potentially 4 times a year, having an author come in and present in the library about books or characters or whatever they want to talk
That'd be
about.
interesting.
Yeah, and so that's going to be the first thing. It's going to take a little bit to grow, because of course, as I'm a new director, we have a new assistant director as well, and so Marnie Smith is growing into her position, and doing a wonderful job
she's terrific.
at it. Yeah, I'm really blessed to have her
Yeah.
as assistant director.
The other program, if I can mention also, that I'm very impressed with, and I've been part of it up until just recently, is Dr. Brandt.
Oh yes, the Foreign Affairs discussion
Foreign
group.
Affairs,
and-
that's been going on now for, it must be at least 4 years.
Yeah.
They meet every Thursday morning for a 2-hour discussion on a whole host of issues with regard to what's happening in the world. And this guy is a lieutenant commander, I think he was, and he's very, very knowledgeable. Does a lot of research, spends a lot of time. That's Thursday mornings. I encourage anyone to join it. It's well worth the effort.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
he does it twice a year.
Yeah.
The one time it's done under the Foreign Policy Association publishes a book for Great Decisions, is what
Great Decisions, yeah.
what that series is called. And so the readings are in 8 parts. I'm sorry, I believe it's 12 parts. And then, is it 8? I
Yeah,
think it's 8.
No, I think it is 8.
Okay, yeah. And so then within those 8 periods, people discuss the reading, and Craig is really the
Thursday
person who's
mornings,
directing it.
an hour and a half, I think it is.
10:30 to 12.
10:30 to 12,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was, I thought that was a terrific guy. And that is, he's been at it for quite a while. You hope that he's going to continue.
He is, yes.
He is
Yeah,
anxious,
he absolutely is.
I have to find some time to get back there.
Well, please do.
There's a lot going on, and I really think that we've got one of the better. What is the name of the association that we belong to, where you can borrow material from within the group if you don't happen to have a particular video or a particular book that you want?
So the consortia that we're a part of is the Merrimack Valley Library Consortium.
Okay.
And that's one thing that's somewhat unique to Massachusetts libraries, is that it doesn't just end there, because there is also a state umbrella that all libraries operate under. And within that umbrella, we're able to use the Commonwealth Catalog, so that if we can't find you something in our library, and we can't find that within the Merrimack Valley Library Consortia, which is, I think, 32 libraries that are a part of that consortia. We can go outside of our consortia, somewhere like the Minuteman Library Network, or Noble, or Sales.
And you can actually track down a particular film or whatnot in any one of them?
Get it delivered to the Burlington Public Library.
Is this something
No
that
cost.
somebody at the library would do for us? You know, if we came up with a book and
Absolutely.
a staff member would do that, or would we be given a certain resource and screen, and we would search for it ourselves?
You could do it either way, however you feel comfortable. We're more than happy to help out. We're more than happy to teach someone to learn how to do that. And if you're savvy enough at home, you can find a link on our catalog that gives you
Is that on
access
the
to the
town website?
Commonwealth Catalog. Yep.
Great. That's real handy.
Yeah, oh, it's fantastic. And even beyond that, we can go outside of the state if need be. If nobody in the state has this, we've received books from New Zealand, Scotland. These are mailed
I
to
didn't
us.
realize you could go that far.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
The world.
Yeah, well, it's called the World Cat. Is the catalog that's used? Yeah, that we use for that.
How appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, do we
Michael.
lend books also to the world?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when called on, we lend more materials than we borrow from other libraries, which is kind of a big deal in terms of libraries to be a net lender rather than a net borrower. And I think that really shows how well we're supported by our town as well, so that we can have these materials for our own residents.
Where are we going with the written word?
Well, it's one of the oldest technologies. The book, the codis, is one of the
Could we
oldest
back
technologies.
up and could
Sure.
we describe what's meant by the written word?
Books. Anything that has been
written
written
word is
down that you
books.
can pick
Okay.
up, and they have stacks and stacks and stacks. I'm sure you've been there, and the room, I don't know what you call it, the room where they have all of the newspapers.
Yeah.
And the written word, I can't. I love the computer. I use the computer as much as I can, and but books are my thing. I just can't get away from them. I really enjoy having a book, and I guess maybe it's just a habit, an old habit. I'm an old hand, so and I just wonder about the future. Do you have any thoughts about not only the future with regard to that, but the future of the library that you have now taken over?
So it's going to be very different, the library that is now, that will be. But first I'd like to talk about books, because like I was saying, that is one of the oldest technologies.
Right.
Almost as old as the wheel, as fire. Those are major advances that brought us to civilization.
Printing press came a little bit later.
Well, a little bit later for the printing press, but yes. So the idea is that it's been around for so long, and really the transfer to the electronic format, yes, well, that does help expand the access of it. Publishers have been fairly savvy, at least book publishers right now have been fairly savvy about managing the drift to the electronic aspect of books while still maintaining print sales. And print sales are if not staying level, then increasing in many ways.
I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that surprised a lot of people after
Yeah.
seeing what happened to the music industry, after seeing what happened to the magazine and newspaper industry.
Right.
These industries all had a very difficult time with the transition to digital content. Movies, I believe the movie houses are having a difficult time somewhat with this, but book publishers are still done very well, and I think it speaks to the need and the want to have that old technology of the book. It's very useful. It's difficult to improve upon in many ways. If you're a student and you're marking up a book. When I was at Simmons College, I worked in their library, and nursing students, you could always tell a nursing student because their book that they were using for their classes was heavily marked up with different colors of sticky notes. And so they would color code their book so that they could flip to a certain area very quickly. That becomes somewhat difficult to do in a visual format with an ebook. You know, there's no stack of pages that you can just quickly flip through. So, like I said, I think it's a difficult technology to improve upon. However, many people enjoy reading in e-version as well. And so libraries have to meet both of those needs. And that's been something that's been somewhat difficult because it stretches our budget in two different ways. People want the same book in print as they want in electronic version. We've dealt with that, though, in the past because you're talking about audiobooks, large print books. We have to duplicate these titles in multiple formats so that we can meet the need of people. So it's a challenge with any librarian who's selecting materials to select equitably so that they can serve everybody who's interested, but also have breadth of formats as well as content that's available.
So the written word is here to stay.
Oh, here to stay, absolutely. And I don't think necessarily that libraries are going to disappear and all of a sudden it's going to be a space where you hover your iPad over a little a table and all the content goes to your tablet, because that's another thing that we've quickly come into is that information isn't free. It may be freely available on the internet. Of course, there's a lot going on with net neutrality and the access to this information through the internet. But
let's not forget the plethora of advertisements that also pop up
that support these. Yeah, you don't have that happen in a book, do you?
So well, why do I think that's going to happen? We're going to start seeing advertisements in books.
We may. We see it in a lot of different formats. If you're looking at magazines, now you're reading the newspaper online.
Come to think of it, every other format.
Yeah,
exactly. Other than books so far.
I guess it's probably just going to take someone in publishing to come up with that idea and sell it to their, the head of publishing.
Let's not give many more ideas.
No, you better stop there.
How do you feel about, I can gather your feelings about your new position here. Do you see any changes in the, not the immediate future, I would say the long-term future of Burlington in particular? Circulation is level. Pretty much at the moment. Are you entertaining? One thing with regard to the library and the use of the rooms in the library, I have to give you a great big thank you because I practically own room 4 upstairs there. It's been going on now I've been teaching there for, it must be 4 or 5 years, something like that. And you've always been very gracious. I'm always a little hesitant to approach one of the people upstairs because I have to ask them to open the door, and you've been very, very kind and done it in the past. At any rate, I appreciate it. I guess what my question is, what do you see any big changes, small changes at all in the future of the library, the way you found it?
Well, libraries are becoming community centers in many ways that they maybe didn't used to be. They used to be a community
place to hang out.
Yeah, they used to be a community center in terms of coming there to educate yourself. And that's what your group is doing in many ways. You're not necessarily using our resources, our traditional resources. You're using the space.
I'm sorry, what's Pat's group?
I'm teaching French there on Tuesday mornings. I have a new student this morning, as a matter of fact. I have 10 students. We've been at it for, I think it's at least 4 years, maybe 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's been one of the longer running groups that we've had in the library. And those meeting rooms get used like you wouldn't believe. It becomes somewhat difficult to find an open spot sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a unique challenge as we expand library programming, still being able to offer this space to community organizations and community individuals who want to host a public and freely available event in the library. So I do see, the amount of programming that we're offering becoming more available, but also the idea of this space of the library is being used by the community, be it for by the people who are in college. We have a lot of students who are working in the library. We have a lot of people who are telecommuting to work, who use the space in the library as a business space. And then we have community individuals using this to better the community in many ways.
Sure.
There's a new group, English at Large, that's doing ESL classes in this space. And so I would like to be able to increase the opportunities for community organizations and individuals to come to the library and use it as a shared community space. And I think that there's great benefit in terms of the space that we have available at the library. We could do that.
Are you able to estimate the number of people who come to Burlington from out of town for whatever service?
Not really in terms of the people who come through the door, no. We can in terms of the amount of circulations in some respects, but there have been, it's a little difficult because of the way that some of our policies were with library cards and communities of, or residents of other communities. So an easy way of doing that is by looking at the barcode on the library card, and that's usually something that gives us that indication. But no, I mean, unfortunately, not in a fine, granular respect.
Right.
But I do know that just.
Oh, there is there. I know. I've not a lot, few individuals that I know from out of town, from Billerica in particular, that do use our library, which I think is good. There's nothing wrong with it.
No, and I think that happens with a lot of libraries too.
Well, we're almost out of time,
Oh,
but
wow.
I did want to ask the question about celebration of book banning week that I saw advertised in our town paper. Could you tell us what that's about?
That was
Are you
that
celebrating
was
the banning of book like it's a good thing?
no.
Or was it saying that it shouldn't have happened?
Yeah. So that was great when you asked me that too the first time. I had to look it up because I was trying to figure out where that might have come from. It was a press release, I think, at the same time as when I was announcing, my coming into the position of director.
So
and
putting those two together is
Yeah.
kind of scary, Mike, here.
I don't blame you. So it's banned books week, I'm sorry, that the American Library Association hosts every year, and it's an annual event in September where libraries have as a philosophical idea at the heart of us is that we offer free access to information regardless of who you are. We don't censor, we don't filter. If you come up and ask me for a book, I don't judge you in any respect, because the moment you start doing that is the moment that you start, that person starts drawing back from learning that information.
True, and we're all public servants, and so
Exactly.
We're getting, excuse me, I'm just getting a signal that we're getting close to the end. There's so many more things that I wanted to ask you, but at this point I want to thank you very much for having spent this long half hour or short half hour.
Feels short.
And I would, as I did with Brian, I'd like to ask you to consider coming back within the year to tell us about what's going on in the library again. And other than that, I wish you the best. For one, I very much appreciate all the services you have, and I wish you well. And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'd be more than happy to come back.
Yeah.
Thanks for the invite.
thank you very much. Thanks
Thanks,
for
Larry.
coming. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will have a whole bunch of programs. Keep in touch. Thank you.
Good night.